Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast, where I've got a special guest with me today, Drew Chalfant. It is French, so make sure you say it right when you see him at conferences, people. And he's the Chief Operating Officer at FranDevCo, and he's a recovering, and I'd say a very, he's doing well in his road to recovery of being a franchise attorney. No offense, Tom or crew or Lane. But a couple of things, if you don't know Drew already, I'm going to tell you a few things about him. Then Drew, I'm going to let you tell everybody a little bit more about you, a little bit more about FranDevCo. But
Sure.
he's broken his neck. He was in a rock band that toured around the Midwest when he was younger. And this was kind of fun for a lot of you. Emily, George, take note. But like Drew is also like, he was a kind of a Tom Cruise style cocktail. Remember that movie? Bartender. So you could do the bottle flips and the crazy shakes and all that fun stuff. So Drew, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on.
Dave, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, and tell us a little bit more about you and about FranDevCo before we jump into our topic today.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, recovering franchise attorney. So, I think you covered some of the exploits of my younger years there, between breaking my neck when I was in my 20s to trying my hand out at being a rock star, to bottle flipping as a bartender, which I did actually as I was entering into law school. So, just quick and dirty recap of how I got to here. I was bartending for a living in law school, and I ran into a gentleman who was the in-house counsel for a franchise development firm right as they were launching their first brand, where they actually owned the brand. So they were doing franchise sales for a number of brands, and they were also standing up a boutique fitness brand called Cycle Bar that they were taking to market. So I started in the proverbial mailroom as a legal intern in their in-house legal department. So helping make sure that we were doing the things that we needed to do from a compliance perspective for sales, but then also making sure that we were doing things that we needed to do for Cycle Bar as an emerging franchisor. Stuck with that all the way through the growth of Cycle Bar and its eventual acquisition by Exponential Fitness. During that acquisition, the franchise development firm that I worked for was also acquired, and eventually the buyer kind of folded the development arm into the company. That set me up to write the next chapter. For me, that next chapter was starting my own franchisor focused law firm. So we were a boutique law firm, a la some of the names we're all familiar with in the industry that do. We write FDDs, we register them with the various states, and then we just provide day-to-day compliance support for franchise brands from their first FDD and first franchise sale all the way through when they're thinking about, looking at a strategic exit for their franchise brand. As part of my work at that law firm, I had the pleasure of also being outside counsel for FranDevCo, and very familiar with the FranDevCo model. Starting my career in-house for a franchise development firm, I was very familiar with what they did at FranDevCo as an FSO, a franchise sales organization. And eventually, they had kind of courted me for a year or so, asking, "Hey, what's it going to take to get you to come over here full time, help us run this thing?" And I said, "Guys, I'm building a law firm. I've got my name on the door. Like, I'm doing my own thing over here." And eventually, their persistence won out, and they made it worth my while to. I packed up the family. It was a wife, two kids, two dogs, and a fish, and we loaded up the station wagon and headed down to Charlotte, North Carolina, from my original hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, and transitioned into more of an operations role. So I'm sitting in the COO chair down here, not a legal role. I'm not counsel for the company, but franchising it's a highly regulated industry, and for better or for worse, it can be a highly litigious industry. So, the legal background certainly helps with my roles and duties as the chief operating officer at FranDevCo.
Nice. Yeah, well, what a journey. And I just have to ask, did you actually drive a station wagon from Cincinnati down to Charlotte? Because that would be a great.
I did not. I drove a loaded down Subaru with some bikes on the back and overpacked, and I think I was probably grinding the fenders on the tires as I was coming down some of the mountain passes through Asheville. But we made it down here safe and sound, and we're loving it. We're loving it down in Charlotte.
Good. I hear great things. We drove through not long ago on a family vacation road trip. We got the old Griswold family station wagon loaded up as well,
Nice,
proverbially.
nice.
So love
Yeah.
that. Well, hey,
You,
let's jump into our topic, man. So, guys,
sure.
the reason why I wanted Drew on is he's got a ton of experience from both legal operations standpoint and a unique perspective working for FranDevCo, which is a reputable franchise sales and development group. So, what we want to talk about though is something that we've seen a lot, right? There are headlines, we all hear the kind of the murmurings in the speakeasies at IFA about people who have overextended themselves, they've grown irresponsibly, and now they're paying the backlash, the litigation, the challenges. It's a bit of a rash, right? It's easy to be a greedy bugger and try to grow too fast in this industry, right? And there's a lot of temptation to do it, and people have the tools to do it, right? It's not hard to plug a brand in and sell the crap out of it. But what we want to talk about today, Drew, and I want to ask you to kind of frame this up, like why this is an important topic to you. But we want to talk about what's the roadmap, the model for strategic growth, what's required, and responsible growth, because it can be fast. I think about like guys like Aaron Harper that have cracked the code and they're following probably the same playbook, I would guess, but that are growing very quickly, but yet they're deploying everybody. Everyone's open within a certain period of time. It's not selling a bunch of 10 packs and then, having people that are strapped for cash that can't open their third territory that now have 7 more to go, right? So
Sure.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about how this topic is kind of near and dear to your heart, and then what are some of the key things you think we should be focused on today?
Yeah, sure. So I think when I think of, over aggressive franchise development or franchise development that is not balanced against,
Mhm.
do we have the operational capacity to support this? Do we have the infrastructure in place to support this? I always kind of the quote that always runs in my head, maybe it's just because I'm a huge Jeff Goldblum fan, is from the 90s hit Independence Day, where he says something to the effect of, you spent so much time trying to figure out whether or not you could that you never stopped to think whether or not you should. Right. And that's kind of the lens that I look at, just unmitigated, well, great, if we could move 10 territories last month, maybe we can move 15 next month. And that's great, and there's definitely something to be said for, if you have a brand that has caught the industry's attention and it is a good investment, should you do you almost have a responsibility to yourself to meet as many people as you can, take in as many leads as you can, and then sell a number of territories? Absolutely. Does that responsibility to pursue that FranDev also need to be balanced against, okay, so do we now, based on all these franchise sales, do we have enough operating cash flow from these sales to support, a real estate person that's going to help if we're a brick and mortar store? Do we have our suppliers in place? And are we going to be able to get equipment to all of these people that we sold? Do we have internally the leadership team, whether it's account representatives to kind of help each of these new franchisees? Have we gone back and done an analysis of, okay, every 20 stores that we have open means that I have another full-time employee that I need at the franchisor to support with whatever digital marketing support that we've promised, or customer service support that we've promised, or do I have the marketing people in-house to support all of these? If I have 120 grand openings that are now on my books, what does that look like? Do I have the people that I need that are going to support 120 grand openings, right? So while it's great to make hay while the sun is shining, as far as the FranDev goes, you need to stop and take a beat every now and again and look at, have we put the necessary infrastructure in place to support the growth that we've achieved? Because while it might be wonderful to just continually load cargo onto the ship, if you're only loading cargo onto the one side of the ship and you're not balancing that out on the other side, well, you're going to have a really, really, really well-stocked ship that is going to tip over into the harbor. That's not even going to get out to the open water, right? So balancing the ability to sell a lot of units and territories with making sure that you have the things in place to support that growth is something that it's central to what we do here at FranDevCo. So we do not see ourselves only as the outsourced sales department for a brand. We also need to understand what is going on with that brand operationally so that we know. And I mean, some of it's self-preservation, right? I mean, it is not in our interest. We also will get lumped in if we're helping a brand irresponsibly franchise, we're going to get lumped into, some of the negative consequences that can come from that. So it is very much in our interest to ensure that the amount of Fran Dev that we are doing and the success that we are achieving for the brand is in a sustainable way, for both of our sakes, for our brands and for FranDevCo's self-preservation as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important, and we don't want to focus on that, right? But there is precedent, right? There's plenty of precedent now that shows that if you are an organization that's assisting a franchise brand grow irresponsibly, and then some sort of litigation arises, you're usually roped into that, bundled into the overall suit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I mean, lived it firsthand, right? I mean, it's been transitioning over into an operations role. It has been a little bit hard for me sometimes to shake. You mentioned recovering franchise attorney. Attorneys are all nervous, right? We're all nervous. Everything we see is like, oh my God. I mean, at least for me, maybe it's I just haven't been able to turn it off. But I walk into a grocery store and I see, well, that pile is stacked too high. One of those is going to fall over and hit somebody on the head, and there's a lawsuit. I mean, I see the same thing, in the day to day of what we do and what happens in the franchise industry too, where it's like, well, that's not going to end well, or that could, if they don't thread that needle perfectly, then that's going to lead to liability here. So I've had to kind of shed some of that nervous Nelly off a little bit to make sure that, you can't have only the legal risk tail wagging the business development dog. So I think for me, it really is balancing those things, because you mentioned that when a brand gets roped into a suit, if there's like a groundswell of litigation or there are issues at the franchisee level and they bring those back to the franchisor, one of the most, and arguably the most vulnerable underbelly of franchising is the development, is the sales effort, and things that went wrong during the sales process, whether it's an improperly done FDD. If you went to, a chop shop FDD mill and got a bad FDD, that can be disastrous for you. If you played fast and loose with the item 19, if you've got people making all kinds of financial performance representations, there's a lot of things that can go wrong during the sales process. And a lot of times, if franchisees want to have any recourse against the franchisor, I mean, that's the underbelly, right? I mean, that is the part that they need to, that gets the highest amount of scrutiny. So yeah, I mean, it's top of mind for us because, coming from the in-house legal department at a development company, I personally oversaw a development company getting brought into litigation that really, what it arose from, the franchisees of a brand were not happy and were not successful. They came after the franchisor, and a plaintiff's attorney is not worth their salt if they're not going to name anybody and everybody that they can possibly name in the chain. And that's going to bring in the sales and development company. It can also, not to make this all about just risk and doom and gloom,
Right,
but
right.
if you plugged in a real estate company that doesn't do what you said they were going to do, well, then both the brand and the real estate company could get dragged in. And I've just seen it so many times that it does stay top of mind, again, without trying not to be too much of a Chicken Little, that the sky is falling all the time.
Yeah, well, you are an attorney, so we expect a little bit of that. Don't worry.
Sure.
And we still love you, Drew. So let's talk about the good side, right? So that
Yeah.
frames it up, right? If you're not a little bit nervous now about what you got going on, then you're probably not listening. But it doesn't have to be all raw nerves and scary stuff. Like, there's a way to do this, right? There's a way to do franchise development responsibly that creates successful franchisees. Rule number one of franchising, right, is create successful franchisees. And once you've done that, then the rest, it's a flywheel that keeps the rest of the engine flowing. So how do we build a model where we can grow and even throttle growth without being irresponsible and forgetting to take care of the people that are making the franchise valuable in the first place, which are the franchise owners? Drew, what are some of the key lessons you've learned there from your experience?
I would say, from the brand perspective, I would say having the capital, whether it's actively deployed at the franchisor level, or it's at least in reserves and you have access to it, having capital to get you through a dry spell. If your franchise development efforts are the only thing that's keeping the ship afloat, that is rarely a recipe for success. Because even if you have a wonderful run, I mean, the cost of franchise acquisitions can be pretty high, right? I mean, if you're working with the broker world, if you're working with a franchise sales organization, I mean, it's really no secret to anyone who's kind of dug into what working with any of those groups, what that looks like from an economics perspective. What's left for the franchisor? It is not, and even if you're not using brokers or you're not using an FSO, your franchise fees that you're collecting, they are a down payment that your franchisees are making for future support and services that you are going to deliver to them. So if you are going into franchising thinking that your initial franchise fee is going to be some, long-standing profit center line item on your balance sheet, on your income statement, you need to reassess, because it's not what it was ever meant to be, and it's not what it's going to be. And even if you go on a really good run and you're able to get your franchise acquisition costs down really low, maybe you're running a purely organic play, you've never paid a penny to a broker, you've never engaged a development company, you've been very fortunate to just have large organic growth. Well, they're not making new dirt, right? So, I mean, territory is your inventory. After you get going on a nice long run, there's going to be a period where, okay, franchise sales are going to slow down. It's going to take us a while to get some of these stores open. And until these stores get not only open, but also ramped up to where we think that revenue potential per unit, that average unit volume can be, there's a little bit of a desert period there, right? There's a lull before you start getting royalties to really self-sustain your system. So I would say when we think about responsible franchising, it's measure the cost, know what it's really going to take, especially if you want to go on a large run. I mean, sometimes adding a lot of units and a lot of territory is not it's not the just crazy influx of cash that you think it is. You need to be prepared to self-fund and bootstrap some of that growth, or have access to outside capital.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. And so rule number one, right? Let's encapsulate this as have enough cash to be successful. This is hard for a lot of emerging brands because some of them they've paid a lot of cash to become a franchise. So they emptied the piggy bank, and now they're like, okay, now I'm a franchise. And now they're like, oh crap, I don't have enough people to support my franchise operators.
Yeah.
And there's more to it. We're gonna peel back another layer here, but I just want to make sure everyone's listening to this part, which is you have to have enough cash to support the operating expense. Your OpEx will outpace your royalty revenue. Always, always, always. I don't know anyone who does it otherwise. There isn't an alternative. So you have to plan for that valley when you sell a bunch of franchises where you're spending more money than you're making for quite a while before the royalty revenue starts to catch up. But by then, you've also sold more units, right? So it's almost this widening gap for a period of time that only operational excellence at the unit level can close the gap with royalty revenue.
You brought up a really good point there too. There's an expression that gets used. I remember hearing it, playing baseball when I was younger. I've heard it used, I think, in the golf context as well, where slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah, I was just saying that to someone this morning, man. Yeah, it's true. Go on.
So, well, I mean, if you think about, if a client's coming to us, if a client's coming to FranDevCo, and they come to us and they say, I've got this great concept and we have, it's a kind of a blue ocean in front of us. I've only got this one corporate store, and then I've got, my buddy from college is going to open a territory one town over. He'll be open sometime next year. And we get under the hood and we look, and I mean, the financials look strong. They got a good head on their shoulders. They've got a good founder story. They check a lot of boxes for us. And then somebody else comes to us and they check all of those same boxes and they say, I've had 3 franchisees, or I've had 5 franchisees, just one, each of them kind of one town over from me. They've been running for 2 years. I've gotten them to maximum revenue potential for their market and profitability. They've helped me develop my operations manual and my systems. And now I think we're poised for franchise growth. I'm taking client number 2 every single time, right? So sometimes, and it doesn't take a decade. It doesn't take a half a decade. I mean, sometimes it is just that willingness to go a little slow in the beginning and have a little bit of patience, get your systems right, get your kinks worked out, actually prove the model, not just at your corporate store, but prove the model as deployed as a franchise, and then go to market to pour gas on the fire for your FranDev efforts. I have seen that very often be a recipe for success.
Yeah. Well, since we're spitting out, great axioms of truth that are also memorable, the one that comes to my mind is nail it before you scale it, right? Like, and people
Oh,
tend
I like
to
that.
forget that
Yeah.
when in franchising, they're like, anyway, we don't have to go in. There's so many examples of people that had an interesting idea that seemed flashy, and then they didn't have the infrastructure to support, and so it was a flash bang, a flash in the pan, they disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So financing is a key thing here, right? Not
Yep.
only having capital up front, because you need capital, guys, to up front to be able to reinvest in the right people. Sometimes it's just humans. You need humans that can coach and manage, and also the right humans. Don't go hire a bunch of people that are part-time students in their undergrad to try to coach executives that have bought into a business model. Like, you have to actually get some talented people. That's something we should probably talk about, the right personnel and staffing too. Maybe we should lead into that, Drew. But I
Yeah,
see
sure.
a lot where, like, you've got some 22-year-old kid that just got a bachelor's degree in like human anthropology, and now he's supposed to be coaching this guy that's 45 years old and has been running businesses and just dropped 100 grand to start a company in your franchise system. Mismatch city. So talk to me about personnel. So we got to have the money. We need to
Sure.
have people in place. Can you maybe riff on that, Drew? Give us some insights.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that you touched on a really good point just now about who is your customer, and who's the hero of this story, and who's the hero in the franchising story is and always should be the franchisee. Because you can have a franchise system with 1,000 franchisees, and if they're all break even to middling, something like, if you're right at that kind of break even to there's some failing, not profitable, to just barely profitable, congratulations to you and your 1,000 franchisees. You have a system that is in severe distress, right? So I
Yeah.
think, understanding that your franchisee success, like that's the story. Like that's the hero story is franchisee success. And then also understanding that in order to achieve that success, you're going to have tons of different personality types that are coming into your franchise system, right? I mean, you might go in thinking we're gonna market for this type of investor, or we're gonna sell to, we think that military veterans should make up 90% of our franchise system, or we think that, retiring middle managers and SVPs, in their 40s to 60s should be all of our franchisees. Best laid plans, right? I mean, you're going to have all different types of franchisees in your system. You're going to have some of what I call passion players, which is they bought this business. This is what they're going to do for a living. They believe in your brand. They're an ambassador for your brand already. So they think that they can carry that message forward in their market. They're going to be at the front desk greeting people at the fitness studio on Saturday morning, or they're going to be the one who's putting that 13th donut in the box at the donut bakery franchise that they bought, right? The passion players. You're also going to have people who buy multiple franchise locations, and they buy them from 2 time zones away, and they will have never stepped foot in a single one of them because they've got infrastructure in place. They've got managers who can run these things. So if you think about like the wide variety of personalities that are going to be in your franchise system, and then also, as you encounter problems with your franchisees and as you guys tackle problems together, sometimes it's going to feel like spousal relationship. Sometimes it's going to feel like brother, sister, employer, employee, business partners, sometimes all of those things all at once. So all of that is kind of a long-winded way of saying that the personnel that you bring in at your franchisor to work for the corporate office, emotional intelligence, emotional intelligence, emotional intelligence. If you have people who are going to be interacting with your franchisees, they need to have a high degree of EQ. Having a good IQ is great as well, and having experience is fantastic. I can teach somebody franchising. I can't teach somebody how to have the empathy to understand that when a distressed franchisee is calling you, it's because they've leveraged their home, their children's college funds, and their potential retirement funds to fund this venture, and things aren't going well. I can't teach you how to have the empathy to understand that you need to approach that different than just, oh, franchisee number 107 in Omaha has a support ticket that they submitted. It's like, no, that's Bob and Tracy from Omaha, whose kids might go to community college at best if this doesn't work out. That's who's calling you with a problem, not support ticket number 107, right? So having that emotional intelligence and having that EQ at the people who work for your franchise or corporate level, extremely important if they're going to be interacting and interfacing with your franchisees.
Yeah. I want to share a thought I've got on this. So I work with a lot of brands, especially a lot of growing brands that are selling franchises. And there are a couple that come to my mind right now that have kind of grown up in franchising in their adult career, have seen it done right and wrong, have figured out how to do it right. And they're actually working on this right now, building a model so they can take a brand, grow it responsibly but quickly, and then have that model and then apply it to another brand. Like they'll become a platform company, I have no doubt, in the next 2 to 3 years. But one of the things that I see them do is specifically focus on getting the right people on the bus in the right seats. They did that. They were burning cash before they'd even identified the right brand to grow, to make sure they had the right humans in the right seats. And some of their key hires that they focused on first, operators. They wanted chief operating officers who could make crap happen and understood what you and I are talking about right now is mission critical. The two I'm thinking of that are young and smart doing this, that was like their first role. And one of them has reached out to me multiple times saying, hey, who do you know? Who do you know that would be amazing in this seat? Because now I've got this seat and now I need that seat, and it's got to be the right person. And they're both looking for people that have industry experience, have been doing it for 5+ years. Like they need people that have hands-on, so they're not high, so they can really be successful. For them, it was a people first strategy, and there are several good books about that too. And I think for franchise brands that are emerging, it's often Cousin Vinny and Aunt Marge that are helping them run the show. And we love Cousin Vinny and we love Aunt Marge, and we hope you have a great Thanksgiving with them. But my advice is that sometimes your family isn't the best person to help. They're not going to help you grow the franchise brand. So find a seat on the bus where they fit right. But don't make your brother or your cousin, your sister, anyone, your Aunt Marge, the chief operating officer of Aunt Marge has not got that experience in this context to help somebody grow. Like you just got to be careful. And emerging brands, that's like a deadly mistake I see a lot of people make right now.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think if you are a founder or one of the co-founders of a franchise brand, and you just, doing a self-assessment and being just really candid with yourself or with your business partners and saying, hey, you are fantastic at analyzing numbers and making sure that our projections are in line, and you are wonderful at that. You are awful at talking to our franchisees. Like, don't make that person talk to your franchisees then, right? Like, find the person in your organization who has that high EQ, or go hire for it. And if you have someone on your team who's fantastic at developing marketing messaging, but they can't translate that into a grand opening plan for your franchisees, have them stay in the lab and work on the marketing messaging, and then hire somebody who can help translate that and help it actually get deployed at the store level, right? So rather than, if you're a fish, don't buy a book on how to climb trees, right? I mean, hire somebody who knows how to climb trees, and that's where the genius is. That's where you're going to find genius, right? Is making sure, like you mentioned, the Jim Collins, right people, right seats. If that's not you, be honest with yourself, and don't try to force yourself to be something that you're not. Hire into that position, and it'll take you a lot farther than you trying to get good at something that just doesn't come naturally to you.
Yeah, it's really good advice in pretty much every aspect of life, but especially here, I think it's applicable. And you mentioned this before, but I want to talk about this for a minute. So suppliers, right? So we've got, yeah, there are some great, I'm not going to beat my chest here, but there's some really good suppliers in the industry that are focused on their client success, that are experts in certain aspects. They know more about some aspects of this industry than anyone can, because that's all they do every day, right? Real estate folks, if you need someone who's going to help you manage the reputation at the unit level, right? I know exactly who you should talk to. You need videos. You need marketing strategy. Like, there are people in this industry that know franchising inside and out, and they bring, when you bring them into your extended team, right? Your executive functions, by having them outsource, let's say marketing. That's a pretty common one. You're
Yeah.
bringing sometimes 30 years of industry experience into your executive team, and you're only paying them whatever that retainer and the fees are. You're not paying them a salary, so they're hitting a different part of the P&L too. So my advice, and I've got a good, Aaron Harper is a great example of this. He went out and got all the right suppliers before. It's just as he was hiring people, like getting the right people in the right seats, getting the right suppliers to fill the gaps where he didn't have the people for the seats. It's a really good strategy, and sometimes a lot more cost effective when you're growing than hiring a full-time person to just do real estate, because you're only opening 3 to 10 units this year. They're not going to be that busy.
Yeah, and I would say, to that end, if you're as you're investigating suppliers and as you're looking into who you're going to use, whether it's for who's going to put yoga mats into our yoga studio, or who is going to be our real estate project management firm, who's going to be the CRM that we use for FranDev, or the CRM that our franchisees use for customer interaction. There are a lot of people who, when a lot of companies get hip to the franchise space and they see it as, hey, oh wow, so if we get a relationship with this franchisor, now we've got access to all of these, like, this is an absolute gold mine, like, let's go. And I would say those companies, can some of them crack into the franchise world and be successful? Are they coming from a good place? Absolutely.
Sure.
I would say more often than not, though, it's the ones who started with, hey, I think that there are problems here that we can solve. And wow, so our solution, maybe it was originally to be applied in this area. Now we're applying it in the franchise context, and the market really likes it. If you're in the market for whatever type of supplier that you're in the market for, ask around the franchising community, other franchisors. A lot of them, there's not too many that you're going to face that are direct competitors of yours, so they're willing to share knowledge, they're willing to share feedback. Find fellow franchisors and whatever companies that they're personally ambassadors for, that they've used or they are currently using. That's going to be a really good indication that you're not just kind of getting sucked into, a new market entrant that spun up a really flashy marketing campaign because they saw a gold mine in the franchising space.
Yeah.
Go with people who that you can find testimonials for, you can find, objective reviews where people say, look, we use for example, we use Client Tether as our franchise dev CRM. It's been fantastic. We absolutely love it. Well, I mean, if that's coming from a real franchisor that you met at, a springboard event or an IFA function, like, take that testimonial for what it is, which is, I mean, it's gold, right? It really is good advice to get that from somebody who's using a platform. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wise. That's wise, and it's a unique industry that way. To be honest with you, I was a little surprised by the whole franchise fam thing. I thought it was baloney, but I found that it's a lot of people here have kind of a blue sky abundance mentality, where they're, even if I've seen competitors sit down, like painting franchisors that have been in it for 20 years, that are taking some young guy under their wing, saying, look, like, reality is we've almost sold out our territories. Like, there's no reason why we can't go have dinner, and, like, let's talk
Right.
about the headaches. How's your relationship with Sherwin-Williams? There's so much camaraderie that can be in the industry, and I see it a lot. Even competitors can collaborate and share ideas, and commiserate. So don't be shy. I fully get behind what you're saying there, Drew.
Oh yeah. And if you're at one of these franchise conferences, you're just as likely to see me sitting down, laughing and yucking it up with, the Rep'em group and someone from Franchise Fastlane. Like, we're
Yeah.
all, I mean, we know we know that it's a small industry. We know that there's a chance that, I mean, acquisitions happen, brands get merged. You have somebody's a blue jersey this year, they're a red jersey next year. It does you no good to approach this with anything but an abundance mindset. And, especially for us, I mean, some of our clients, the brands that we work with, came to us because maybe they went to a different FSO first, and that FSO said, guys, I've got a brand in this space where we're quote unquote conflicted out, and that's a referral source for us, and vice versa. So coming at it with that abundance mindset, coming at it with a, hey, there's plenty of pie out here for everybody. How can we kind of promote that rising tide to lift all boats here? Support it 100%. And we've got one of our main competitors is here in Charlotte with us, and there's a good chance that before the end of this month, reps from myself and our CEO will be out, swinging golf clubs with their CEO and one of their co-founders as well. So it's friendly, healthy competition, and I think it's good for the industry at large.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, there's one other thing that you'd mentioned early on, and boy, we might need to get together again and talk more about operations, tech stack, and things like that. Like, how do we help support those things? Because there are kind of 4 big pillars, maybe 5. We've talked about cash flow, like having enough money, being capitalized properly. We've talked about making sure you're getting the right people in place in the right seats with the right personality characteristics, so that they can support your franchisees and have empathy, and to help them grow, see them for who they are and what they're trying to do, and really invest in them. One thing we've mentioned, but we only kind of hinted at, and I'm just going to summarize it as a point here, is you also need to recruit the right people. Right? You need to make sure you're recruiting the right people for your brand. Sometimes the Ivy League MBA coming off of Wall Street is not the right person for your brand. And so you need to understand, it's not just demographically, how much capital do they need to have and net worth, blah, blah, blah. It's more important actually to understand their psychographic fit. Are they actually emotionally the right type of a person for your industry? Hey, we are dealing with end-of-life care for elderly people. Do I want an IRS auditor in that role? I mean, no offense to the IRS auditors, but some of them come across a little soulless, right? So, like,
Sure.
yeah, that's probably mean to say that, but anyway, you know what I mean, right? So finding the right people, and then there's more to this equation that we haven't talked about yet. So Drew, you've been awesome. I sure appreciate you on here. Any parting thoughts for us, things that people should be paying attention to as they're trying to grow responsibly?
I would say make sure that you are zooming out periodically to I'll circle back to what I mentioned before, that FranDev can't be the only thing that we're doing. Operations can't be the only thing that we're doing. Marketing can't be so make sure that you have I know they talk about this in, if you're a fan of like EOS and Traction, they talk about the team getting offsite, the leadership team getting offsite to make sure that they're checking that the ship is headed in the right direction, or that they're not, kind of heavily weighted in one area too much. Another way that it gets phrased is, take time to work on the business. Don't just get caught up in the business stuff. So that way, if you take some time to zoom out and say, we've done a lot of FranDev. We haven't really, we don't have a single job posting out for a real estate coordinator, and we've got 100 stores to open next year. Like, make sure that you are taking that at least on a quarterly basis, maybe on a monthly basis, to kind of get off site, zoom out a little bit, and just take a look at the holistic picture of, okay, what have we done in the last 6 months? What do we plan on doing in the next 6 months? Is like what we have in place now, does something need to change in order for what we want to have happen in the next 6 months be true? So just do some of that zoom, and that'll also help you identify too, hey, have things gotten a little out of balance here? Like, are we tilting towards, irresponsibility because we have not balance the scale, so to speak? We've let the FranDev lead everything, or we've staffed up on, we've got all these operations people. All right, well, now let's go find some franchisees. We've got all this support in place. Wherever you're overweight, just making sure that you zoom out a little bit and find out, okay, where do we need to shift a little bit? What needs to be true that's not true now, to keep this thing balanced and headed in the direction that we want it to head?
Yeah, I love that. Zoom out, reflect, focus on the business, have time for it. It's hard to do that when
Yeah.
you're in the business, you're operating your HQ location still as a founder, like
Yep.
get out of that
You
ASAP.
you have to, yeah, I mean, I almost look at it like you have to make time for it the same way that you need to make time for a like a personal medical procedure, right? Like you need to put that on the calendar for like Friday, the first Friday after the beginning of the quarter. We do an offsite meeting. There is nothing that is more important than that. There is nothing that is allowed to get scheduled on top of that. No one's allowed to, oh, it's a client call. Oh my gosh, it could be a big deal. Like, no, this is, you're in surgery today. Like you need to you need to work on things, like put the working in things aside for a day and go work on things for that day. And I mean, you need to, that time needs to be sacred. I mean, you really need to block it off and be extremely protective of it, because otherwise it always gets punted. It gets punted. All of a sudden we've gone 3 quarters without zooming out and seeing what's going on with our franchise system. Oh, no wonder it looks like we're about to fly into the side of a mountain, because we haven't looked up to actually see where we're headed.
Yeah, that's a great parting advice, Drew. I sure appreciate you. I couldn't agree with you more on that one. And again, we'll have to dive in deeper on the operations stack next time and leverage some more of your wisdom. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Dave. It was a pleasure. I appreciate it.